We want to explore the supply side effects of fiscal policy. Now, if we have an increase in the tax rate, the idea here is that we are going to have less incentive to work. So that's going to shift our labor supply curve to the left. So we're going to want to work less at every given wage. So we would see this curve shift to the left, which then would raise the wage rate, but our after-tax wage rate is actually going to go down. So now we also see the impact that we're going to work fewer hours. So the quantity of labor employed is going to decrease. Employment decreases. So that gap between that before tax and after tax wage rate is going to be our tax wedge. Now, if we remember back to chapter 6, when we talked about the aggregate production function, we had the labor supply in this top graph, and then we had this aggregate production function, which remember is how real GDP is going to be impacted by the quantity of labor employed. So if we've raised the raised the tax rate, and that then lowers the equilibrium quantity of labor employed, then we'll see down here when we lower that equilibrium quantity of labor employed, our real GDP, our potential GDP, is going to decrease. Now, we could have said everything in the reverse order. If we lower the tax rate, then this labor supply curve would shift to the right, which would increase the equilibrium quantity of labor employed, and then that would increase potential GDP. So this is all under supply side theory. Now we can also expand that into the Laffer curve. So the Laffer curve shows the relationship between the tax rate, that's what percentage of our income do we pay in the tax, and the amount of tax revenue collected. So if we look at our graph here, the Laffer curve, if we have a 0% tax rate, that means if we worked 100 hours, we get to keep $100 and the government won't get any. But as we increase the tax rate, the more revenue the government will get. Now, if we extend that all the way over to 100% tax rate, that means we work, we earn $100, the government takes it all at 100% tax rate, so we don't get any of it. So we're probably not going to go to work. So the government's going to be back to having zero tax revenue. So if that's the case, at this end of the Laffer curve, we're going to see that if we lower the tax rate, we're going to have an increase in tax revenue. Now, the idea during the Reagan administration is that we were somewhere over on this right side of the graph, and that if we had lowered taxes, it should have tax rates. It should have raised tax revenues. It didn't really work out that way. So we are somewhere over on the left side of this Laffer curve, and these are estimated points for the U.S. and the United Kingdom.